אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, מאין יבוא עזרי, מאין יבוא עזרי, מאין יבוא עזרי. Where will my help come from? Where will my help come from? My help will come from God, maker of heaven and earth. My help will come from God, maker of heaven and earth. Esa einai el hearim, Esa einai el hearim, me'ayin yavo Ezri, me'ayin yavo Ezri, me'ayin yavo Ezri, me'ayin yavo Ezri. Where will my help come from? Where will my help come from? My help will come from God, maker of heaven and earth. My help will come from God, maker of heaven and earth. Esa einai el hearim, Esa einai el hearim. We join together in the English in the middle of our pamphlets, Psalm 121. I lift my eyes to the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from Adonai, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. See, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. By day the sun will not strike you, nor the moon by night. Adonai will guard you from all harm. God will guard your soul, your going and coming, now and forever.
Good morning to everyone. We are literally in the house that Rabbi Jonathan Stein built. The moment of his senior rabbinic tenure here at Congregation Beth Israel laid the foundation, the footwork, the hard work for this magnificent campus to be open. And now we're here, present in mind and body and spirit, flourishing and growing, and very much grateful, filled with gratitude for all that John has given to us and our community and the profound, enormous impression he has made on the Jewish world. We gather in this moment in deep mourning and profound gratitude as we honor the life of our beloved Rabbi Jonathan Stein, a beloved and active member of our Beth Israel community. Whether you knew him as a rabbi, a mentor, a colleague, a cherished friend, or simply as John, his presence was a gift, and his legacy touches us all. Our hearts are with Rabbi Stein's family, to Susan, to Rachel and Len, to Jessica and Matt, to Diane and Andy, to Sally, and to Andrew, Leah, Lev, and Shai, and other extended family members who are joining us, and we know that the loss today is immeasurable, and we stand with you in love and support, sharing in your grief, and in those memories that bind us together. I'm Rabbi Jason Navarez, and on behalf of Rabbi Cantor Arlene Bernstein, Rabbi Cantor Jeremy Gimbel, Rabbi Alana Ackerman-Hirsch, Leslie Mills, our executive director, and John Lefter, our president, we thank you so much for being here in this moment. We recognize many of you who are joining Beth Israel online from across the country and around the world, colleagues, congregants, mentees, dear friends whose lives were forever enriched by Rabbi Stein's wisdom, compassion, and humor. Though we're separated by distance, we are united in memory, in sorrow, and in prayer. Barach tzadikim ke'onoga, holech va'or al nechon chayom. These are the words from Mishlei, from Proverbs 4:18, and they translate that the path of the righteous is like radiant sunlight, ever brightening until noon. These words, for me, perfectly capture the life and legacy of our beloved Rav and friend. His path was one unwavering commitment to family, to justice, to kindness, and to emet, to truth, a light that guided countless people through their moments of joy and challenge, and through all the middles that come along with it. Like the sun ascending to its zenith, Rabbi Stein's wisdom and compassion only deepened over the years, illuminating the lives of all who had the privilege to walk alongside him. Even in his medical struggles over the past few years, his light never faded. It grew, leaving us a brilliance that continues to inspire and warm the hearts of those who carry his memory forward. This morning we gather not only to mourn, but to honor John's remarkable essence. We will hear from those who knew him deeply, those whose lives he's touched, whose spirits he's lifted, and whose hearts he filled with his boundless light. They will offer eulogies, each a testimony and a witness to his character and enduring impact on our world. Through their words, we will glimpse the many facets of his wisdom, his compassion, his humor, and steadfast commitment to his Jewish faith and identity and community. Together, these reflections will weave a tapestry of love and memory, truly capturing the essence of John's life and the profound legacy he leaves for us behind. We are blessed to have a number of colleagues who have flown in from around the country, John's nearest and dearest, to be with us, some of them participating in our service this morning. I'd like to call upon Rabbi David Gelfand, and following him, Rabbi John Adland, to share some words.
A Psalm of David, Psalm 15. Adonai, who may sojourn in your tent? Who may dwell in your holy mountain? One who walks in perfect innocence, who does what is right and speaks the truth from their heart, whose tongue is free from malice, who does no harm to others, and never casts disgrace upon a friend, who disdains the contemptible but honors those who revere God, who stands by their oath even when it brings pain, who does not lend money at interest or take a bribe against the innocent. Whoever does these things shall never, ever falter.
And the child asked, "Tell me of life." And the sage answered, "Life, my child, is a mystery. We do not ask to be born, nor do we even understand the meaning of birth, of creation. We grow and we experience life's pleasures and pains. We love, and slowly, oh slowly, we come to realize that we have become that we are. At that moment, we humble ourselves before the mystery of life and quietly say, 'Though I knew not, I have been granted the most precious gift of all, the gift of life.' And the child asked, 'Tell me of death.' And the sage answered, 'Death, my child, is a mystery. It is the inevitable return of the gift of life, the gift which came free to us. We live as the trustee of that mysterious being, of that unexplainable becoming. Yes, you and I are but the trustees of life. We nurture it, we delight in it, we give of it to others. And at the appointed time, we sadly, yet with pride, return it from whence it came. The beauty, my child, is that what we are, what we have become, remains long after the gift has been returned. It remains as a precious keepsake with our loved ones who live on."
Perhaps the most consequential legacy that John has left us are his students. Our opening setting of Sinai was crafted and came into this world through the guidance of one of John's students, Dan Nichols. Two of his other students, myself and Rachel North of blessed memory, have also continued this custom of resetting our Jewish tradition. You think about the number of rabbis and cantors and educators who are in this world because John said, well, you're going to have to make a choice. Yihiu leratzon imre fi vehegyon libi lefanecha libi lefanecha Adonai tzuri vegoali Adonai tzuri vegoali ליבי לפניך, Adonai tzuri, v'goali, Adonai tzuri, v'goali.
I'd like to call on Rabbi Douglas Krantz.
Shir HaMa'alot LeDavid, Hine Ma Tov U'ma Na'im, Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. A song of ascents of David. How good and how pleasant it is that brothers dwell together. It is like fine oil on the head, running down onto the beard of Aaron that comes down over the collar of his robe. Like the dew of Hermon that falls upon the mountains of Zion, there the Lord ordained blessing, everlasting life.
As I mentioned as we began our service this morning, I noted that there are so many individuals that have come forward the past 72 hours to share beautiful, countless memories, anecdotes, narratives of their own journeys with John. 4 individuals in this moment are going to offer us some beautiful words to add to the mosaic that I know John has brought with him and continues in living legacy. First, we'll have Rabbi Cantor Arlene Bernstein, followed by Rabbi Martin Byfield, Rabbi Ron Friedman, and John's daughter, Rachel Rausner.
It is believed by many in Jewish tradition that dying on Shabbat is reserved for the righteous, that on our day of rest, rest is given by God, as it was given to Jonathan Stein, Morenu Harav, our teacher, the rabbi. This phrase is written on the smicha, the ordination certificates of many rabbis. And this phrase is what has been holding me up since the moment of his death. That is who he was, a beloved teacher and a beloved friend. For 4 years, almost every Shabbat morning and afternoon, I heard Rabbi Jonathan Stein quote Pirkei Avot and say, Moshe kibel Torah miSinai. Moses received the Torah from Sinai and transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and the prophets to the members of the Great Assembly. And they said, in part, raise up many disciples, and make a fence around the Torah. And that is exactly what Jonathan Stein did. With high intellect, passion, and humor, he taught each of us in some way. He pushed us to and beyond what we thought we were capable of, passing Torah, all of Jewish learning, down to each of us, helping us to find our way through to learn what it means to love Judaism, to belong to, or to protect the Jewish people. Many of us are rabbis, cantors, educators, Jewish professionals, and lifelong learners because of his instruction. Part of John's gift of teaching is that he led by example. In a crisis, one could see him gather strength and calm while everyone around him was in a state of panic. It was this ability in the face of a lost child, a tragic death, or the ultimate crisis of 9/11, which made people look to him for leadership and Jewish answers. Of course, then there were moments of teaching of a different color. My first day in San Diego, as we drove up the treacherous Laurel Hill Street, John quietly let me know that it didn't snow in San Diego. Lesson happily learned. His charges to the B'nai Mitzvah students were so touching that I cried every week my first month here, and I complained that he ruined my mascara and my makeup. The next week, waterproof mascara appeared on the pulpit desk we shared. It helped. And then there was the time when driving in the car together, he would drive, pen and paper in hand, hands on the steering wheel, writing notes for a funeral or a wedding at which we were about to officiate. After that, I brought along a traveler's prayer and stuck it on the dashboard for each drive. And those are just a few short stories of lessons learned. Wherever they lived, John and Susan made room for so many in their lives, extraordinary relationships that continue today. Especially here in San Diego, in addition to their beloved grandchildren, Andrew, Leah, Lev, and Shai, John and Susan added 2 bonus grandchildren, Eli and Nora, and their friends, Sydney and Alexa, and they brought them all into their family with open arms and a huge heart. John taught the value of a strong work ethic, maybe a little workaholic. Teaching, praying, and sharing his love of Judaism, his powerful intellect, and his desire to make a difference. His emotional and pastoral generosity were limitless. He was driven to serve. And as much as John taught me and so many others how to live, he also taught us how to die. He had an extraordinary desire to live for his family, for his friends, and for himself. He taught all of us to fight for every minute of what is possible, even if the prognosis is grim, to accept finally the reality when all hope is lost, and to teach and continue to teach even to the last moment. And I'll get to that in a second. Susan, Rachel, Jessica. John's last Shabbat found him surrounded by the 3 of you, creating a Shabbat for his soul with the prayers and camp songs and the music you played for him. You were the ministering angels that brought Shabbat to him, and when it was time to take his last breath, you were there to accompany him as God took him, and he was not alone. And that is rare. So John and I discussed many things on my last visit with him, and after everything was said between us, he just wanted to teach me one more thing about how one should approach the dying. And in the end, because I could not bring myself to say goodbye, as he had instructed me, he held his arms out with that huge wingspan to give me a hug so he could say goodbye. I am holding out hope in the very traditional Jewish part of me that believes our souls will meet in the heavenly Jerusalem. And so I can only say, Shalom, Morenu Harav, peace, my beloved teacher and friend.
The expression to break bread with someone means to share food, or better yet, to share an entire meal with someone. The origin of the expression is unclear. Some believe it derives from the Torah. Some suggest it comes from the ancient Romans, and others think it might come from the New Testament. Personally, I think its origins are Jewish. On Friday evenings when we gather for Shabbat, a Shabbat dinner, it's customary to have a challah on the table. After we recite the motzi, the blessing over the bread, some of us slice the challah, but many of us pass the challah around, and each person at the table breaks off a piece. Regardless of the expression's origins, we all know what it means. Many, if not most of us here today, have broken bread with John. Maybe at an Oneg Shabbat, maybe at a Shabbat morning Kiddush, maybe at a family event, a bar or bat mitzvah, a wedding, a shiva. Maybe it was at the Stein's home, or maybe one of ours. Some of us have broken bread with John at a restaurant. About that. How many of us know that John did not care for French restaurants? I'm not saying he never went to a French restaurant, but when he did, it was never his first choice. When John picked out the restaurant, it would never have been a French restaurant. Now, maybe you think that John didn't like French food. That would be a logical possibility. But that's not the reason. John liked French food just fine. Maybe you think that John thought that French restaurants were just too expensive, as they often tend to be, right? Wrong again. John was not the frugal type. He was the opposite, always willing to spend money and even spend generously. The reason why John didn't care for French restaurants is because they served, in his exact words, small food. John liked big food. When he was in college, John drove a Cadillac. So we're talking about the 1960s. A Cadillac with one of those big fins in the back. Everything about that car was big. It was like a boat. And that suited John just fine. Now, why am I telling you all of this? John liked big. And that included big ideas. John had the singular talent, a gift really, for being able to think big. and he could articulate those big thoughts in a way that inspired us to bring his big ideas to fruition. John knew how to turn words into a vision that could excite us. Now, John was not just a big talker. His big ideas were thought through very carefully and thoroughly, and they came with a plan of action. Sometimes, not infrequently, his ideas and the plans to implement them were, to a word very much in vogue these days, disruptive. He expected change, and change can be difficult. John gladly joined us and worked with us to achieve what started out as his goals and then became our goals. John was a courageous, imaginative leader and a dedicated, reliable colleague and co-worker. His words and support were a contagious combination, and they were an important reason why we respected and admired him so. Of course, it's one thing to be able to articulate a vision. We all know people who are gifted with language and speech. And it's one thing to be an energetic worker. We all know people who are doers, people whom we can count on to get something done. In addition to those two traits, John was also very, very smart. And just ask anyone who engaged John in a serious conversation or who stumbled into an argument with him. Working congregational rabbis generally take vacation time in the summer. It's our slow season. For congregational rabbis, there's a downside to this. We have to prepare and write our High Holy Day sermons over the summer. No matter what else we're doing, no matter where we are thinking about these sermons. They hang over us. It often helps to have someone to bounce ideas off of. Long before our retirements, my wife and I were part of a small group of couples who spent time together in the summers. The Steins were part of this group. The men, all of us rabbis, would talk about and talk through our sermon ideas. The conversations could get pretty deep as we fleshed out some serious ideas. Sometimes they could get contentious as we defended ourselves or challenged each other by raising counter-arguments. At times, it can be helpful to narrow the discussion to help us get a way forward, so the options are clearer and easier for us to focus on. At least it is for me. So imagine being on a beach, hiking through the woods, climbing a mountain, walking along a glacier, or just sitting around somewhere doing this work. The experience can be exhilarating, exhausting, and instructive. John was superb at this, at both sides, expressing his own thoughts and responding to those presented to him. John was very intelligent and very, very logical. He could easily expose the flaws in our thinking, and on the other hand, would refuse to be cornered into a position he didn't want to be in. Just when you were sure that you had everything figured out correctly, your ideas or his, John would say, and again, in his exact words, "Why are these the only choices?" He was able to point out another possibility, another way of looking at things. Was he always right? Absolutely not. but he did make you think. He did make you consider the alternatives. And your relationship with him, your friendship with him, didn't depend upon doing it his way or agreeing with him. Now, I'd like to say a few words about Susan. Not to Susans, but about Susan. And Susan, if you don't want to listen, I'll understand. At the service honoring John upon his retirement from Sha'arei Tefillah, I described meeting John and Susan for the first time. It was, I related then, easy to find John all weekend. Even at 16 years of age, there was something about John that made him stand out in a crowd. That, and there was always a group of kids surrounding him, vying for his attention. Just find the largest bunch of teenagers, and John was right there in the middle. Now, we were 16. Susan and John, of course, were already an item. Long before this, they were already an item. But she was not part of the group huddled around John. Susan was always apart from John, 3 or 4 steps away. Now, when I described this phenomenon at John's retirement, I said the reason was because Susan was acting essentially as John's scout, keeping an eye out on where John was headed and steering him in the right direction. Standing a little apart from John gave her a great perspective. But there is another explanation. And to help us understand it, let me first read this poem by Stephen Spender. I think continually of those who are truly great, who from the womb remembered the soul's history through corridors of light where the hours are suns, endless and singing, whose lovely ambition was that their lips, still touched with fire, should tell of the Spirit, clothed from head to foot in song, and who hoarded from the spring branches, the desires falling across their bodies like blossoms. What is precious is never to forget the essential delight of the blood drawn from ageless springs breaking through rocks in worlds before our earth. Never to deny its pleasure in the morning simple light, nor its grave evening demand for love. Never to allow gradually the traffic to smother with noise and fog the flowering of the Spirit. Near the snow, near the sun, in the highest fields. See how these names are fated by the waving grass and by the streamers of white cloud and whispers of wind in the listening sky. The names of those who in their lives fought for life, who wore at their hearts the fire's center. Born of the sun, they traveled a short while toward the sun and left the vivid air signed with their honor. Our dear friend, our loved one, colleague, Rabbi John Stein, was one of those unusual, rare people who traveled toward the sun and left the air signed with his honor. So many of us benefited from John's soaring vision, his inspiring calls to action, his fierce determination and his remarkable mind, his devoted caring, and his steadfast friendship. But as the ancient Greeks warned, flying too close to the sun was dangerous. There was a price John paid for these gifts. Susan could see all of this. Indeed, she could anticipate all of this. Standing those 3 or 4 steps away enabled her to be in the right position when John needed her. She was there to catch John and then to help him regain his strength. She knew what to say, when to say it, what to do, when to do it. Our John could be exasperating, sometimes even unreasonable, but nothing deterred Susan. And when she knew what John was ready, she encouraged him to return to the soaring heights where John was at his best. It was John and Susan back then when they were teenagers. It was John and Susan through more than 50 years of a loving, fulfilling marriage. It was John and Susan raising Rachel and Jessica and sending them on their way. It was John and Susan moving together from Pittsburgh to Cincinnati, to Indianapolis, to San Diego, to New York, and back again to San Diego. It was John and Susan to the very end. There was no John without Susan. There is so much more that I could say about John. He had a distinguished career with a long resume. He helped raise 2 wonderful independent daughters and took tremendous joy in the families that they made. He spoke the truth about many things when it needed to be said. I was proud to call him my friend. We have lost a good soul, and we shall miss him. May he rest in peace.
I'm Ron Friedman, an HUC classmate, friend of John and Susan for almost 55 years. Henry Slanimsky, Dean of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion from 1924 to 1952, once offered this spoken meditation on being a religious person. In every community, there is someone sufficiently unselfish, sufficiently generous to carry not only his own burden, but the burden of others as well. Without such communally minded persons, nothing would ever be done. That holds for Jews as well as for non-Jews. It holds for religious undertakings as for all others. They are the leaven in the dough, the ferment in the mass, the conscience of the community. And if you extend the type, you get the definition of a religious man, one who is willing to bear the burdens, and on a higher and more difficult plane, the sorrows, and on the highest and most difficult and almost superhuman plane, the sins of the world. A religious person is one who feels responsible for everyone else. Family and friends, we've gathered together both to mourn and also to celebrate our beloved. You fill in the appropriate noun or nouns: husband, father, brother, grandfather, uncle, friend, rabbi, teacher, colleague, fellow congregant, counselor, inspiration, comforter, celebrator, champion. Our beloved John Stein. We have gathered here, all of us, as a Kehillah Kadoshah, a sacred community of those who have loved and continue to love John Stein, recognizing that with John's death, we have entered a moment that is Yom Norah, a day both awful and awesome at one and the same time. This week's Parashah Chaye Sarah begins with the death of Sarah and Abraham's mourning. The rabbis in Pirkei Avot and Pirkei of Rabbi Natan use this parashah to praise Abraham and hold him up as an exemplar. Whoever possesses these three traits is one of the disciples of our father Abraham. Ayin Tova, a good eye. Ruach Nichama, a profound spirit. And Nefesh Shefela, a humble soul. John possessed each of these qualities and many, many more. Buzzy and I and our wives, Ina and Irene, have shared an intimate friendship with John and Susan of more than 50 years. We celebrated one another's triumphs and joyous events, grieved one another's losses, commiserated over one another's misfortunes, traveled together through much of the United States and to exotic places on 4 other continents. The last gift that John gave to Arlene, Buzzy, Rachel, and me was the excruciating privilege of sharing words with you on this day. John possessed an ayin tovah. He did not simply judge people favorably. He welcomed people into his life, engaged them with his passion, celebrated their talents, invited their contributions to any community with which he was involved, challenged them with his teaching and preaching, and most of all, he listened, made it clear to every person with whom he was engaged that he, she, or they were important. John's relational success knew no boundaries or limitations. People mattered to John, and he let them know it. You all know that John was a natural leader. He drew us all in, introduced us to one another, made each of us a co-conspirator in his extraordinary quest to make the communities we shared and the world that we inhabit better places. John challenged us. I've often thought of John as an exceptional interlocutor, a great speaker, a brilliant interviewer, an insightful questioner, and occasionally as someone who loved to play devil's advocate, which also occasionally made him, shall we say, a pain in the tuchus. In that iteration, John could be like a dog with a bone. He didn't let up or let go. But in all of these manifestations, John demonstrated that the holiest symbol of Judaism was not the Torah, not the mezuzah, not the menorah, nor the Magen David. It was clear through John's engagement with life and with all of us that he understood that the holiest Jewish symbol is the question mark. It is in that attribute that John reflected his depth of spirit. I remember John and Susan encouraging us to read a book entitled The Soul of an Octopus. He was deeply moved by the author's meditative descriptions of the octopus's unique intelligence, for it reflected John's metaphysical search. John had a profound belief in the idea of multiple kinds of consciousness. We would periodically receive emailed articles, the first describing the consciousness of a wide range of animals, then moving on, a new subset on the consciousness of trees, vegetation, and plant life. That subset was followed by a series that sought to identify the consciousness of inanimate objects. Simply stated, John was fascinated by deep questions about the endless possibilities of the universe. And despite his greatness, John possessed a humble soul. I don't mean an aw shucks kind of humility, but the humility that our Musar tradition teaches us: no more than my place, but no less than my space. I remember speaking to John years ago when he was in a low mood. He was quite open about how he was feeling. I responded that he had led an incredible, successful family and professional life, more remarkable for the fact that he had, in many ways, parented himself and had subsequently taken on leadership responsibility in virtually every single community and organization with which he was ever associated. I suggested that that was a great deal of weight to have to carry through all those years. John allowed that there was truth to my observation, and then he shrugged his shoulders as if to say, "What else could I do?" Cy Montgomery, the author of that book, The Soul of an Octopus, a surprising exploration into the wonder of consciousness, writes, "But what is the soul? Some say it is the self, the I that inhabits the body. Without the soul, the body is like a light bulb with no electricity. But it is more than the engine of life, say others. It is what gives life meaning and purpose. Soul is the fingerprint of God." For 76 years, John blessed all of us with his integrity, with his unflagging commitment to Susan and his entire family, to the Jewish people, and to the world, with his contagious and ebullient joy, and with his marvelous sense of inquiry. I don't pretend to know what happens after we die, neither did John, but I do know that he confronted the vicissitudes of this life with a courage that seemed superhuman, battling pain that would have broken virtually anyone else. Simply stated, John was a great soul who impacted the lives of too many to count. The poet Maya Angelou wrote these words of consolation upon the death of the great writer James Baldwin. It seems appropriate to apply them now to John. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder, lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly. Our eyes briefly see with hurtful clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Slowly and always irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration, our senses restored, never to be the same, whisper to us, they existed. They existed. We can be, and be better, for they existed. John existed. John exists. Somewhere in the universe, I imagine that he is whispering to us, you can be and be better. Zecher Tzadik Livracha.
This is sort of like batting cleanup for the Yankees or the Padres. Is that better? No? This one. This is sort of like batting cleanup for the Yankees or the Padres. For those of you who I haven't met, I'm Rachel, and John was my dad. I was elected or forced to speak on behalf of our family. Only if you are an RK, a rabbi's kid, can you understand what it's like to share your dad with the entire community. Seemed like everywhere we went, someone knew my dad, a restaurant, a grocery store. Once, a young woman approached my sister and said, "Your dad married me." And she was so taken aback, she screamed at her, "No, he didn't, he married my mommy." Our lives were so completely intertwined with temple and with Judaism. Our friends' parents were our parents' friends. On Friday nights, if I wanted to go to the football game, I had to go to temple first for services or Shabbat dinner, so our family could be together on Shabbat. The Jewish community has always been a part of our family, from PAFD to HUC to Gucci to Indianapolis Hebrew Congregation, Temple Shari Tefillah, and Congregation Beth Israel. If you were confirmed at IHC, it was my parents who taught you about sex at the Human Sexuality Weekend. And it was my parents and our friends' parents who chaperoned the annual confirmation trips to New York City. It was a little bit mortifying and a little bit wonderful at the same time. When he was ordained, I was 5 years old. 5? 4, 5? And I stood up in the synagogue in Cincinnati and said, "That's my daddy." I was the only kid in the whole class. When my son was born, and I called my dad to let him know, he was teaching an all-day Hebrew marathon at the temple. And he shouted, "It's a boy!" And the whole social hall erupted with joy. Dad inspired so many people to enter Jewish professional life as rabbis, cantors, Jewish educators, musicians, all by showing them that Judaism is sacred and joyous and fun. From telling Shabbat stories with Ketantan to nursery school kids, to being with congregants and friends on the most memorable days of their lives, he touched thousands of people. He even missed his 20th anniversary surprise party because he was with a friend who died. But he was more than a rabbi. He was a son, and he was a brother to Diane. The two of them have a shared history that none of us will ever understand. They knew each other the longest. He was lucky to have so many incredible friends throughout his life. As you've seen, he's still in touch with friends from high school and PAFD and rabbinical school and camp, some of whom are here in this room today and others who are listening in. Friends from Indianapolis and their families, the Seder crews. Raise your hand, Seder crew. who all know the answer, the only answer to why we do pretty much anything at the Seder is Greco-Roman. And they're old and new friends here in San Diego. And the list goes on and on. He is blessed to have 8 decades of friends who are like family. He met my mom exactly 62 years to the day that he died. Eastern Standard Time. They met at a youth group convention that was promptly canceled on the day that JFK was shot. And then they got engaged on the day that Martin Luther King was assassinated. I'm not really sure what that means, but it worked out, and they were married for almost 56 years. Their respect and love for each other and their steadfast commitment has been a model for both my sister and me in our own marriages. Dad made it his business to teach us how to be successful human beings. From putting the dirty dishes I hadn't washed on my bed. To be fair, the cookie sheet was cooling. To dropping me off by himself at college. Jess and I are so lucky. There aren't many people in the world whose fathers get to officiate at their weddings. At my wedding, my dad couldn't put 2 words together at our ketubah signing. He couldn't do it. He couldn't get the words out. And then on the way down the aisle, he just said, "Oh my God, oh 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 my God." And then he cried his way through the ceremony. We thought maybe John Adlin might have to step up and step in. To being lifted in a chair during the hora, Dad knew which moments were sacred, which ones were joyous, and which ones were both. Through all his health struggles these last few years, he was always determined to get through it, to get to the next exciting thing, whether it was travel across the world or spending time with his family. He was a really good dad. He came home for dinner most nights, and he was the one that had the patience to teach us how to drive. We loved it when he was the one who had to take us shopping because he was very impatient, and he basically let us get whatever we wanted so we could just get out. When the movie Dances with Wolves came out, this is very politically incorrect and cultural appropriation we know now, but it was the 80s, so it was okay. Dad gave us all Indian names. Dad's name, unsurprisingly, was Makes Noises. Mom's name was Listens for Noises. Jessica's name was Horrified by Noises. And my name was Costs Money. Of course, Dad could be pretty embarrassing too. He would sometimes get a little food in his mustache. And if you let him know, he'd just put more food on his face. On our family cruise a few years ago, while everybody else was eating Christmas dinner in the dining room, Dad taught us all how to make spoons stay on our noses. Cousin Uncle John loved taking the cousins and nieces and nephews and grandkids on adventures. He loved water slides and roller coasters and jet skis, and he was a pretty fun guy to be around. His 4 grandchildren were really the luckiest of all, though. He would do anything, go anywhere, or buy anything for them, of course. He made it his business to really know them. He asked them questions and really listened to their answers. He relished their individuality and had deep, special relationships with each of them. From following behind him as he paced the house practicing his sermons, to taking care of him during this last year and being present for his last moments, it has been the honor of our lives to be his daughters. Love you, Daddy.
As we hold all of these beautiful memories and words of John's life and legacy, I ask you to turn to the front of your pamphlet for Psalm 23. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echzar, bin ot deshe yarbitzeni al me menuchot yenachaleni, nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'ma'agele tzedek le'aman shemo. Gam ki elech beged sal mavet lo ira ra ki ata imadi. Shiv techa umish antecha hema yanachamuni. Ta'aroch lifana shulchan neged zorai deshanta bashemen roshi kosi reva'a. Ach tov v'chesed yir dafuni kol yamei chaya. Vishanti Bevet Adonai Leorech Yamim. I invite you to join me in the English. A Song of David. Eternal God, you are my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in paths of righteousness for the sake of your name. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff you comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever.
Immediately following the conclusion of our service this afternoon, we will invite the pallbearers to escort the casket. If you are planning to attend the interment, we will invite you to make your way immediately following the conclusion to your cars as soon as possible. The interment will be at El Camino Memorial Park at 5600 Carroll Canyon Road, and the address is on your pamphlets that you received this morning. Immediately following the interment, everyone is invited back to the synagogue for lunch and for Shiva, and there will be a Shiva service that will follow after the lunch. The family will also be receiving visitors Tuesday and Wednesday evening at 6:30, with Shiva services at 7 p.m. at 700 Front Street in the Meridian Room. Both Shiva services on Tuesday and Wednesday will be live streamed. The family has also requested, because John and Susan were so passionate about our egalitarian mikveh that we are soon to build here at Beth Israel, and they are very much looking forward to supporting its success. They have asked if you're so inclined to make donations toward that effort. The exact link can be found on the rcbisd.org website. Under Giving and Donate Now, you will see in the drop-down Building Fund Mikveh Donation in that menu, and we invite you to do so if you are so inclined. And invite you to please rise at this time.
El mele rachamim, shochen bamromim, hametzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, im kedoshim utorim, kezor harakia, mazirim, et nishmat Yaakov Avraham ben Michael asher ufeg Elchana shelach leolamo began Eden tei menuchato Ana bal harachamim yastirei את כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר Amen.
Together, God filled with mercy, who dwells on high, bring proper rest beneath the wings of your presence, amid the ranks of the holy and pure, to John Stein, who has entered eternity. The Garden of Eden will be his resting place. May you, who are the source of mercy, shelter him beneath your wings eternally, and bind his soul in the bond of everlasting life. Eternal God, you are his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen.
Amen.
So we turn in our pamphlets to the words of Kadisha Tom, the Mourner's Kaddish, remembering the essence of John, his kindness, his thoughtfulness, his intellect, his menschlichkeit. We join together. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbi, be'alma divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei, b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayeh l'chol beit Yisrael, ba'gala u'bizman kariv v'imru amen, Yehei shmei Rabbi mevarach le'olam olamei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitvoman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudisha b'richu, la'ela mikol b'echata v'shivata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'yimru amen, Yehei shlama Rabba min shemaya, v'chayim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'yimru amen, oseh shalom b'mromav, Uyaseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. As we ask for the source of peace to send peace to all who mourn, we also say zichrono livracha, may his memory, may his kindness ever be for blessing. As we say together, Amen. I'd like to call upon the pallbearers at this time.